Alright. Real quick, I'm just going to grab this stream link and link it in the Kenosha Rocks Facebook group. So if you'll bear with me. So this time what I'm going to be working on is the Bulbasaur. So that'll be pretty fun. See if I can hear myself. Testing. Nope. So that'll be pretty fun. Yep. Alright, so let's copy that. And posting. All right. Oh, is this it? All right. Yes, it is. Okay. So I'm going to be using another stencil. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. You can kind of see some of the creases in it right now. Once it gets on the rock, you'll be able to see it a lot better. What I'm going to be using is just a combination of blues and greens, and also, of course, my go-to, which is purple. Use some of that as well, but that'll be at the very end. But the main colors that I'm going to be using to actually paint Bulbasaur are, of course, just the those greens and blues. Alright. So first things first, gotta figure out where I want Bulbasaur to go. So again, just kind of matching up around where I would expect it to end. Maybe I want to start on this side because that's where his face is, and kind of want his face more on the rock. I don't care as much about the back. If that goes over the curve, that's completely fine. Just making sure all of the different locations are where I want them to be. So up here, just kind of eyeballing it. Alright, so now let's try to remove the sticker. And again, I don't really have much nails to do this, but if I have enough patience, I'll get it. And I should probably bring up that window just to see if anyone's commenting. Let's go and refresh. Alright. So now I've gotten it peeled away just slightly. Just enough to where I'm not at the actual outline of Bulbasaur just yet. Now I just want to position this. I want it to kind of stick onto the rock a bit. It keeps on slipping out from under my finger. Alright, so making sure the face is where I want it. Alright. Honestly, what I could do is I could just fold it. That might be the easier option. I do like to roll it, so maybe I'll just put a small fold in it. I'm not creasing it down too much, but just enough to where I can overlay it exactly where I want. And even while that's kind of there, I'm not pushing down too much on it because I still want to make sure it's positioned where I want it to be. And then when I get it there, I'll just kind of slide this down and stick it. Just like that. Now, it's not going to stay completely stuck. It's not an extremely good grip with just that. At this point, I'm not going to really pull away at that point. I want to push down. You never really want to pull away because what will happen if you pull away is you might end up kind of removing it at its line where Bulbasaur's head starts. So you always want to push down so that you don't kind of ruin the stencil. So here I go, pushing down. Just like that. You can see certain parts are a bit more resistant. That's fine, just want to take your time because if you rush it, chance of ruining it, that's no fun. So that part gave me a little bit of difficulty, but I was able to just lift up slightly. That was its eye, actually. Just lift up slightly, not too much, because you don't want to pull away or pull it completely off and have it completely come away from the sticker paper. And then I was able to kind of go back and reapply it a few times just to make sure it was in the spot that I wanted. And there we go. So that is looking good enough. Now I'll kind of press it down. I don't see any real huge disconnects, which is a good thing. So I'll just press it down. Now if I found a lot of disconnects, what I could do is I could just go in there and reposition things. It's really all in just how much time you want to spend on it. It's not too difficult to reposition the stickers. It's not going to be an extremely hard stick to the rock. It's sticky enough to hold while you're painting around it. You still do have to be a bit careful though when painting around it. So there it is. You can see it a little bit in there. Not too much though. Those lines are actually pretty close together, which is really good actually. That just basically means that the lines are very close in. I got the sticker on there pretty exact. So what I'll do is I'll start with the bulb on its back. Start with the green. So I'll just start removing those pieces. In just a moment. All right. And again, when I'm removing these pieces, I'm finding the biggest gap I can between the of where it's separated, and you can see a line here, right there. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of getting in there, just on the top of it, and then I'm just pulling backwards. And what that's going to allow me to do is get up underneath that sticker pretty easily. So again, just straight here, and I'm not putting any pressure. You don't need any pressure for this. And then I'm pulling back, and that'll get you right up under the sticker. Easy peasy. And then I'm just slowly lifting up on it. Doesn't take much force. Does take patience though. So there we go. Got that one enough away. So I'll just go in there and tear that up. And I'll put it on this sticker paper. Make sure to put it on the side that's kind of waxy, not the paper side. Otherwise, you will have a lot more difficult time trying to remove it. Again, same deal. Just find a point where it's separated pretty good, and then just pull back. It'll lift right up on it, no problem. Just like that. And so that's 2. Looks like there are 4 pieces overall on the bulb. And just lifting up until I can get my finger underneath it. And at that point, it'll just stick to my finger, and I can pull it away pretty easily. Just one more piece here. This one's going to be a little bit difficult because there's not much separation in the line, so I just got to kind of feel around. And get under there. There we are. Now when going around these edges, I don't want to apply any awkward pressure to it just because of how it winds around. You generally want to be pulling, I would say, away from. So when something kind of curves around, you want to make sure that you're going kind of in a straight line. If it's curving and you're pulling like a direction that isn't kind of keeping the route straight, what you risk is having it warp the actual sticker, and it'll make it a lot more difficult to put back on because it won't be the same shape anymore. So you want to avoid just kind of pulling on it real hard in any direction. The slower the better, and you always want to be going kind of in a straight line. So I'll get some green here. But we don't need too much. That's probably more than I need, actually. So, and I'm going to leave that out because I'm going to actually mix this green in with the blue in order to make some of the other colors. I know I've said this before, but it really does apply here, and it does make things pretty awesome, is applying things in a very thin coat. You can get away with doing that when you're using a stencil very easily because you don't need to be exact, so you don't need to be very precise with going over spots you've already done. So I can see maybe when doing a normal kind of painting, you might want to have it in a heavier coat so that you don't need to go back over things and all of that stuff. Have a very precise hand with what you're doing. With stencils, of course, you don't need to have that precise hand. So what I find works really well when painting using a stencil is just making sure the coats are very thin, because what it'll allow me to do is it will allow the paint to dry faster, and I can just go over it again with a second coat pretty quickly and can kind of move on even faster. So I don't really have to wait around for any paint to dry. Alright, so I'm just going to wait a moment. Let's dry. That's getting there. Don't have any paint on my hand, but I can tell it's not really at a point where if I would have put the sticker back over it, it would have probably pulled off some of the paint. Might still. Now I'm applying more coats because I can still see the rock through the paint. I don't know if you can see that over the stream, but I can still see a little bit of the rock. And if I want to make it more of a solid color, well, I want to make sure that I can't really see the rock, at least very well. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it's just if I want to make sure that it's as solid green as possible, I'm going to want to go over it multiple times. Something else that I've found is sometimes what will happen is while I'm painting things like multiple layers, sometimes I'll actually start taking away paint. If that happens, really what you want to do is you want to wait a little bit longer to paint over that section. So that just means that the paint that you're putting on, you're actually just taking it away. Paint is wet, so of course it's going to just kind of soak it all and then start to kind of clean off the paint from where you've already painted. So all you have to do again, just give it a little bit more time to dry. Then you can start again. So that looks fine to me, so I'm going to give it a little bit to dry up. Then I'll move on. Clean off the brush a little bit. And I'm going to dry my brush as well, just a little bit. Alright, so that feels dry enough. Now for the most fun part, putting the stickers back on. Maybe not the most fun part. But really all I'm doing is I'm just placing them back where I took them from. That's why when I put my stickers on this paper down here, I actually keep them in the same order, just so that I can keep track of everything. And then I'm just trying to match 2 points. Once I match 2 points pretty well, then it's pretty easy to guide it the rest of the way. And just holding down on it with my other hand. And that looks good for that one. And 3 more. So this one. Now what I'll usually do is I'll just kind of push it into a corner so that it's not going to move very much in that one corner. And again, I just kind of rotate it. I pivot it slightly just to get to the next corner. And that's where I push down. That's where I kind of hold it in place to allow my hand to get away from the sticker sticking to me. And then I'll reposition where I need to. If I see that, oh, it's too much, or it's too off, well, that's a pretty simple fix. Just take the sticker off slowly and then reapply it. And this one is probably one of the more difficult ones on this one, the Bulbasaur, because it kind of winds around, so I got to make sure that it's lining up. But once I have it at the bottom there, I can kind of push it down and guide it along its way. So it's kind of a crazy one, but it's not too bad still. Now these smaller ones, what I like to do is just on the back of my knife or whatever I'm using, just placing it on there just like that. And then I'm using the knife, so my fingers are just too big to kind of hold that and maneuver it. So I'll use the knife to get it where it needs to be. Then I'll just push down with my other hand again. And it's as simple as that. So now you can kind of see the outline of that green. Green's all under there. So now I'm done with that section. Next one I'm going to do is the blue, just kind of his main color, his main skin color. So I'm going to start removing that. Ooh, and this one's going to be interesting because it's it's mostly in one piece. It looks like there's actually two pieces overall, which might sound nice. You don't have to remove a bunch of different things, but it's actually something that makes it a lot more difficult because you go around a bunch of turns and all of that, and when you're doing that, you have to be very careful not to rip anything. And you can rip it, but then you have to be sure that you can kind of get it all back to where it needs to be. So what I'm doing right now is there's a lot of arrows kind of pointing up, right? So there are lines for his ear that kind of go, you might be able to see it on camera. Not too much. But up here, you can kind of see a line and a line on the other side. And what will happen is if you try to remove it by pulling from this direction, you'll actually just rip right across. it'll rip the ear completely off. So in order to get that ear out, you actually have to start at the top of the ear and release it, pull it down, and that'll allow you to get past that point pretty simply. But it does mean that it takes a lot more focus, a lot more doing than anything. Just a lot more patience. You got to look at each of those points and try to figure out where might give it some difficulty. You can kind of see now, maybe. You can kind of see the arrow that I was talking about. I'm just going to gradually pull on it. Try not to mess anything up. Just kind of pulling around on it. And whenever there's a thin area, I'm kind of skipping over that to try to pull on a different place. Now it looks like I started pulling up on the mouth, and that didn't stick to the rock. So what I can do is I can just lay it back down, press down on it a little bit, and I don't have too much light, but you can see it a little bit. I'm just going to hold it down with my knife. And once I have that first bit down, I can kind of hold it down on the other side. Once you get past that first part, it's pretty simple to kind of keep it going. You don't have to worry too much about the mouth after that. I say too much because you still want to be paying attention to it for sure, but usually it's not going to come up after that first part. Unless you change directions and start going the other direction, then of course you might have to worry about the other side, but that's fine. Patience is definitely the name of the game. So this is where it gets tricky. Might have looked tricky before. Now it gets really tricky because this point, I'm going to just push down on that mouth a little bit. So now the lines want to go upwards, right? Because its face, it goes up, and then it starts its body around, and there's no separation for the sticker. So going this way, if I tried to pull on it and tried to take it all off from this side, it would never work. And the reason being is because these lines, there's a point here, there's a point here, if I pull on it, unless this area lets go up here, that's kind of after the point, unless that lets go, it will rip. It'll stretch, it'll rip before it even gets to that point. So what you can do is you can just assist it. You can pop up that point. So kind of doing what I did at the start to get it started. Bringing it on up. That'll help me from the top. I'm just making sure that I ease it on over. At any point where I start to pull up on things, there's not much, so you can kind of see here, maybe, as I try to pull up on it, it's not giving me much give because at this point there's another one of those dots on them, and it goes kind of directly this way. So it's too much to try to pull up all at once. So I'll go in again, and I'll help it. I'll assist it on up, just pulling back, just like that. And it's nice and slow. Alright, just like that. And now I'm kind of taking the stickers off of 3 different sections at once. So I gotta make sure that I'm not missing anything. It's super simple too. So that one is out. So I'm gonna keep it away from the other sticker paper. Don't want them to stick to each other. That would be no fun. If it sticks to me, I don't flail around. Don't do anything like that. Just make sure that you know exactly where you're moving, because you can very easily start to just try to stick to everything, and that could ruin everything. So there we go. So you can kind of see the whole thing there. A lot of effort to remove it, but so it's a little bit difficult to work with. So I'll just put this down on the paper. Again, the more slick side, the wax side. Alright, and then there's just this last foot down here. There we go. So I definitely want to make sure I put that where I'm going to remember it. Right there. All right. So I'm going to press down on everything a little bit. Just directly down. You don't want to move side to side or anything like that, because of course you could end up moving some things around, and that's going to make it very difficult to get that thing back on. At that point, you'd almost be better off just taking the thing off, and then after you put the original thing on this guy, then you'd put the piece back on if it moves any. So I'm gonna go with a blue. It's like a bluish green. So what I might do is I might mix the two, but I'll use mostly blue. Alright. So this is how it looks so far. Got that piece off. So I'm just going to color in the blue. Maybe give that blue a little bit of green first though. This is actually kind of dark. Just might give it a little bit of white as well. Lighten it up a little bit. None of it is, well, at least for me anyway, it's not an exact science. I have no idea how to make most colors, but usually I just eyeball it. And I'm just having fun, so it's no real issue. Eyeballing everything. Alright, so this does have a lot of points on it. You can kind of see them. The smile is a big point, the chin, the legs, all of that stuff. The ears, there's a lot of different points on it. Now whenever I see points, what I want to do is I want to move away from them. Because if I'm moving across them or at them, there's a very high chance that I could make those points fold up. And if that happens, well, it's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing, because in the end, as long as the pieces are kind of gathered, like this piece is back on there, the piece that I just took off, as long as that's back on there, you're going to be painting the black outline anyway, so it's not the worst thing to have happen, but I do like to try to keep it all where it is because it just makes things a lot easier in the long run. Oh, I thought I had more than enough paint, but it doesn't look like I'm going to have anywhere near enough paint. Which is especially no fun because I mixed my paints together to make that color. I don't know how much I used of each. So I guess pro tip, well, not pro tip, just something I kind of thought of just now. don't, if you're going to mix colors, try to mix enough for all of what you need. Otherwise, you might have two different colors on your painting. I'll try to get it as close as possible, though, so we'll see. Yeah, and I'm definitely going to be using a lot more than what I have down, even if I was to be able to kind of cover everything with what I have on my brush and what I have on my paper. I would want to go back over it because right now it's very splotchy, and in order to get it looking very consistent, what I usually do is I kind of, at the end, I paint in one direction, as long as I'm still being aware of all of the different parts that go to a point. Usually it's more of a light kind of thing where I'm not applying much pressure. Alright, some more blue. Still have some white, still have some green on there. Oops. So I'll just mix them all. Blue. Some white. Alright, here we go. And really, when I kind of give any kind of pointers, those are just from my experience, from just painting random things. I don't know best practices, best ways to do things. I just kind of make sense of it, and whatever I find easiest, I generally do. The easier, the better. So right now I'm going back over some of the places I've already painted to apply another layer and trying to make that that coat a bit more consistent so that it looks blue, like a consistent blue, not blue and lighter blue and just a bunch of different colors. All two. Blue and lighter blue. This isn't the most fun part, at least for me, but I find a lot of fun is definitely the shading part. That's when you can really start making it look cool. But of course you need the foundation first, and I think that as long as I have a good foundation, which is just the structure of the thing, then I can make something I'm kind of happy with. It's too often that I'll draw something or paint something and Now one side of it will look really good. At least to me it'll look really good. But the other side, trying to make them match up. I'm sure you've had that issue in the past where you go to draw something and draw the eye, and it looks perfect, and then you draw the other eye and just throws everything off. I have that quite often. When that happens, usually, for me personally, if it's not something that I think I can fix in an easy manner, I'll just start it completely over. Alright, this is looking like it's a pretty consistent coat now. Maybe a little bit more on the back and a small amount more on the front leg. But after that, I think I'm ready to move on. Yeah, a little bit more on the front leg. Maybe a little bit more everywhere. As it dries, I start to see more and more, and since I've already started making it a very kind of deep color, might as well continue. Alright, so maybe I'll let that dry. And notice usually I'll have a lot of paint collect towards the top of the brush. When I see that, I might just kind of angle the brush a bit more, while still being aware of where the paint is going to hit, in order to use up some of that. Now there are actually two more things that I have to do before I get to the outline and the eyes and all of that fun stuff. All the stuff I'm just going to paint black. And those are I've got to paint the nails white. And I've got to paint his spots. And I got to paint his spots the very similar color to his skin, but darker. So I got to get more blue. If this is dry, I might leave that for a little bit longer. None of it came off on my finger, but I'll be a little bit safe with it. Plus, I'm going to have to mix this up anyway. So I've got some of my blue. And I'll use some black here. Don't need too much. I will be using it later, so even if I use a little bit more than what I need, that's fine, because I'll be using it on the outline. Alright, well, that's feeling good. I'm going to start with the easiest first. Very tiny. So kind of like what I did before, again avoiding the blade. The blade is away from me. Just going to stick it to the blade. Part that comes to a point. And just going to set it in there. All right. This part will be fun. Kind of. So because this is overhanging, I might want to put that down first, while making sure not to have any other part of the sticker touch it. I'm just lining up the where the hand comes down. There's a bunch of points. Right there, you can kind of see all those different points. I'm just lining them up in there. If I can line up those three, it should be pretty good. Alright, now for the body. That's good. Now, little back legs. This is a bit awkward. But I got it. Alright, and the head. Still making sure that it's lining up where it needs to. And I'm not pushing down extremely hard anywhere because I want to have the opportunity to go back in there and potentially reposition certain things. But so far things are looking pretty good, which is awesome. Yeah, looks like it's all matching up. Awesome. So, that's a pretty big part, and that's probably the most difficult part about the Bulbasaur one, is definitely that huge piece. Now you can section it. You can go in and maybe at this point cut it. Maybe at this point you can cut it, as long as you remember exactly where everything goes and can kind of keep track of all that. Then you should be completely fine. You can cut it in as many pieces as you need or as you want to make it as easy as possible for you. But perfect. Okay. So the next one I'm going to do is the I don't even know what you call them. The skin spots? Something. The dark bits. These things. I'll lift up on those. And here I would say it's really important to keep track of where you're taking off things, because they're just triangles, and it's very easy to lose track of where one of them might have gone. Of course, you can look at the size of them, the shape of them, to determine where they might have gone and all that good stuff, but it's just a lot of extra effort. I would just rather keep it in a location where I'll remember its orientation, or kind of what direction it was facing. There we go. So we've got the ones on his head done. Ooh, and this one's very tiny. Things that are very tiny, I let my knife kind of handle them. It doesn't need to be exact on the sheet where the thing was. It's just got to give you a good idea of where it needs to go when you return everything. There we go, just two more. And then I'll be on to the actual, just the nails. Sometimes it does get a little bit difficult to get up in there, mainly because when you put something back over it, it doesn't line up exactly, which oftentimes it won't line up perfectly. There might be a small overhang. It'll kind of hold the piece down in place because it's painted, unless you have really nice light, or it's just daytime. uh, you might not be able to see the lines so clearly. Can't see where it's a nicer separation between the sides and all that good stuff. But just having patience and not really forcing anything. That's going to be your best bet. Because force anything, well, of course, it's just gonna. You have the high potential of just stretching out what you're working on. And if you do that again, it's just very difficult to get everything back to where it should be. So don't need all that paint. There we go. It's probably dark enough. I think a little bit of green might have helped, but that's fine. And just keeping the coats fairly thin still. So then by the time I'm done going through these first ones that I painted, is generally dry. I can go over with my second coat. Now these rocks that I make, in the center, there's a little bit of what I would call a bias. Basically, there are a bunch of lines that kind of travel in a single direction. And what I'll do is when I want to get a very consistent color, what I could do is if I have a lot of paint in my brush, I could go against those lines, and those lines are going to assist in the paint kind of, it'll assist the paint coming off the brush. But if I am making very thin layers, you might want to go with it. Let it dry, all that good stuff. So then I'm kind of working with it. I'm going in the same direction where like the paint can flow, so it doesn't bunch up anywhere. Alright, so you can kind of see, got the dots painted in. Now these are a bit thicker. I left a lot more paint in there than I usually do. Just giving it a bit of time to dry. I'm wiping it a bit to clear off some of the excess paint, or basically make the paint into a thinner layer, just to speed it up. While I'm waiting, I'm going to clean off my brush. And then put all those pieces back on, and just do the same thing with the nails that I'd done with this. And then when I'm pretty close to being done with the actual design, the structure of it, a lot of these I'm going to just navigate. I'm going to put these pieces back using the knife because they're very tiny. My fingers aren't huge, but they definitely are big enough to cause an inconvenience when trying to move these pieces around. They kind of block my view and make it more difficult to just put the thing back on. There we go. There we are. And just 3 more. Again, when I do this, I am using the back side of the knife. Of course, I want to be as safe as possible, especially with something like an X-Acto knife, which is what I'm using. Pretty sharp, so you want to be very aware of when you're being a bit dangerous, being a bit carefree. Still want to keep in mind that if you're using a knife anyway, that you are potentially using a sharp object and don't want to hurt yourself. Alright, so all of them are back on now and it looks horrible, but hopefully for not too much longer. Ooh. I would say that this part, even though it's not the most tricky part, I will say that it's probably the most tedious part. So there are nine nails. And they're very tiny. Very tiny. Now, it's not necessary to do all the things, but if you want to, you can go through each and every single one. And do the thing. Now, let's see. Yep, that's just going to be the way to do it. One way around this, and this is something that would involve pre-planning, is to paint the rock towards the bottom all white. That way you wouldn't actually have to take all these off because it'll already be white. take them off, put them on, all that good stuff. I mean, this, I'm actually having difficulty just getting it to stick to the paper. Let's see if the second one goes a bit better. So what I'm going to do is, after I get it up just slightly, try to get it stuck to the knife. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to slide it off. And there's two. Alright. I would say patience is definitely key here. Four down. That's five. That's six. Six more to go. Getting the hang of it a little bit. Alright, last foot, which is just three more. Again, still just finding the easiest spot to be able to get up underneath the sticker without bending it too much, especially here because there's not extremely much to bend. There we go. Alright, so that was a lot of work for not too much, but mine's as well. So this white will probably do it for me. So there really isn't much to paint. The white that I had, I've laid out before. So I don't need too much paint here. So I'm kind of keeping it at a point where I don't have too much paint on my brush. And I'm just kind of spreading it. Now I want to be a little bit careful about how much I swipe back and forth, because there's some blue paint still on the sticker, and what could happen is the paint that I'm using, which is white right now, that's still wet, so it could try to mix in with that blue, and then instead of just having the white nails, I'll have very light blue nails, which again isn't the end of the world. It can be whatever. Alright, so the most fun part, I imagine, putting all these back on. Now, if you weren't sold on the idea before that painting the thing white prior might be a good idea, the thing that you also have to remember is that when I have to put each of these pieces back in there, well, they're going to have to stay there when I tear up the outline. So that's one thing that's pretty crazy. The other thing is that when putting them back, you want to have them oriented in the same direction as when you took them off. And that's rough, because they're all just triangles. I'd say that's kind of a double whammy. So difficult on top of difficult. Well, I guess I wouldn't say difficult, it's just tedious. Very tedious. And there I was kind of rotating it around because I'd noticed that the piece wasn't in the right rotation, wasn't in the right orientation. So I had to kind of maneuver it to make sure it was pointing the right direction. Alright, halfway done. These are a little bit better, a little bit easier to see. Because they kind of go to a point, so I can see which way they are supposed to be facing pretty easily, pretty quickly. If they flip over, found the easiest way is just rotate whatever tool you're using to pick them up. Just rotate it right around, and then very simply just push down on it. Alright, so just one more here. Alright. So, this I would say is the second to the best part, is being able to peel off this outline. So right now I'm just taking off all of the different parts and pieces that I need to color black. So it's going to be this piece right here. Now from this point on, I don't have to put anything back on at all, which is awesome. So everything kind of speeds up from here on. So I do say that needing to reapply the stickers definitely is one of the things that does take the most time. So right now I'm just taking off the mouth. And while I remove the outline, of course, I just want to make sure that I'm not going too fast, so that I'm going to miss something. So definitely don't want to get this far and then kind of peel off a bunch of things that you don't want to, and have to do a bunch of additional work just to make sure that it all looks the way you want it to. So over these nails, I'm going to be very careful to try to keep the nails in place. And then also when I'm painting over this, I also got to be very careful not to kind of lift up on these nail pieces. Alright. So I'd gotten to a point at the bottom there where it snapped and I don't have much to pull. So I'll just start at the top and then work my way from the other side. So it'll meet up at that point anyway. So I might as well just take advantage of that. So far it's looking pretty good. Alright. Just 3 more nails. There's one. There's 2. And there's the 3rd. Okay. That, kind of like I said, is just very tedious, but there we go. Got my outline and all of that good stuff. So now I can paint all of it black. There we go. Here we are. Now up here, I don't need to be too careful about how I put down the paint because it's in an area where a lot of the sticker is making contact. Once I get down near the nails, though, then I'm going to have to be careful. I'm just going to follow these lines around, just like this. And when I'm dipping it, I'm really just kind of dipping the top part of the brush into the paint. So I really don't need too much. Because if I get a bunch on it, well, I might be painting the sticker. But of course, that doesn't do much for me. You've got to be a bit careful around this turn because of that piece that's really thin. High chance that could come up. And if that comes up, well, I'm just going to have that side of the bulb is going to be black. You can kind of see what I'm doing. Just kind of going with the lines. Avoiding the nails until the very end. Now when I go over these nails, you might want to just kind of dab them with the paint. Because of how ready they are to kind of come up at any moment. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of starting top, bottom, and then I go through the middle pieces to almost push each of the pieces down so that hopefully there'll be no issue where it wants to rise up. Alright, last part. Alright. So I'm just wiping off the paint a bit there so that I can go over it, kind of wipe away any excess paint just to make it dry a little bit faster. Smear that paint out a bit. It's looking pretty dry. All right. Nothing sticking to me. So the best part is taking this piece off. Well, all of the pieces off really is the best. So you can kind of see it outline everything, and it's pretty cool, just like that. So now I'll peel off maybe one of the bigger parts. I'll peel it off not too quick. Don't need to rip it off. If I do that, I might rip off more of the paint than I have to. And, well, I don't want that. So, let's go at a reasonable rate. There we go. See these darker spots. If any of these pieces give you difficulty coming off, it's actually just better to go in with your knife and take them off that way, because if you pick at them, you're in the risk of pulling more of the paint off than you have to, and I don't want that. Alright, so far we got the nice, whatever you call them, splotches. And let's get the bulb. Ooh. There we are, and one more. And there we have it. Now, of course, if I wanted to end it there and make it nice, make it what you would expect, all I'd have to do is just add in maybe the white dot in its eyes, and that changes everything. Because right now it looks kind of goofy, kind of spooky, but the that one dot within the eyes makes a huge difference in how they look. If I put the dot in there, it'll be cute. If I don't, well, it won't. And you can kind of see on these normal ones, Flareon, if you didn't have that dot in there, it also look kind of goofy as well, kind of spooky. Of course, I kind of make it more accentuated. I want to make sure that you don't know what to focus on. You kind of see it as just a shadow. I almost forgot. I can take off the nails down at the bottom. And let's see how that turns out. I'm assuming that some of them won't be all too good. Some of them will be fine though. There we go. Some of them are a bit stubborn. They don't want to come off. I'm just kind of using my knife to get them off because my nails weren't definitely weren't doing the trick, and I see why. Even with a knife, it's a little bit difficult. It's kind of funny. It's difficult to get them on there, difficult to get them off. But at the very least, this time I don't need to be very exact with the thing, which is pretty nice. Good change of pace. Alright, so now you can see all of the nails down there. Decent enough. Can't complain about that. Now, purple. Now, because it is already getting pretty late for me, it is 12:30. Probably just going to go through and shade it a little bit. Might not do too much of the purple surrounding and everything. I do like shading. That's kind of what I look forward to usually when I paint any of these. So I'll do a little bit of shading. And then I will take off. Ooh, that was a lot of paint. But most of it went back in, so that's good. And I'm going to mix in some black with this. I'd said this last time. Usually what I do to test out how it's going to spread is I paint a bit with it. What I'm really doing is I want to make sure that when I push down and drag the brush, I get kind of a consistent amount of paint coming off of it, especially when I'm shading. I don't need too much paint on the brush in order to shade. I actually want a very small amount of paint on it. And then I just kind of circle around, and you'll see it darken just slightly. Now, here we are. Alright, starting to get somewhere with it. Have a bit of that shadow. I've actually looked up some interesting theories, or I've heard some theories. I don't exactly know where and why. You might think that usually in movies, when they show something as being like some type of monster, and usually the design that works pretty well is like the sunken eyes, you know, the, the shadow around the eyes, stuff like that. And I think that that's a primal fear that kind of is inherent to human beings, in that like people are just kind of scared of it without really needing any prompting to be. It's kind of how like birds know how to make nests, or generally do anyway, without needing to really be taught. I think that this is kind of one of those things where humans immediately notice that, well, if someone has like this kind of look to them where you can't really make out where they're looking, and they have the sunken eyes and all of that, that you should be a bit spooked by it. And I think it's just due to, over time, people who might have been diseased or whatever might have always had that similar kind of look, and became something that was just more passed on. It's kind of interesting stuff. But in order to make spooky things, you could definitely utilize those kinds of fears. Of course, the darker, well, actually, it's not just the darker it is, but the more contrasting it is. Because darkness isn't, it can be inherently spooky, not being able to see, but what really makes something pop is a contrast between that light and dark. So knowing how to shade things will help out a lot. If you want to make things a bit spooky. I like to extend the smiles out a bit as well, just to make it a bit more unsettling. So you'll recognize that, hey, that's not really normal. That's not how that's supposed to look. And now I'm just kind of putting shadows where I would expect maybe a shadow to be. So maybe the back a little bit. Definitely this foot down here. So we're kind of seeing that through his leg. Well, through his leg. Under his body, basically. So we're seeing it all the way through there. There's his stomach, which of course is the opposite of the top of him. Because he's facing, well, his stomach is facing down. So you're pretty safe in assuming that that all is going to be pretty dark. This inner leg, because it's facing in towards that bottom there, pretty safe in assuming that that's also something you can shade down. This area just underneath the head, once again pretty safe. It's going to block out a lot of light. You would think the back would be a pretty good spot, but let's say maybe the sun is hitting it from here this way. Then that means that you could probably shade here as well. And none of it has to be perfect. I mean, this is just the fun part, really. Just kind of play around with the colors. As you go, you just have a small amount of paint on your brush, and you're just darkening things up a little. And it really gives it some pop, you know? So a little bit on the face, towards this side if I wanted the sun to be hitting from this area. So bring this up a little bit. Just like that. And then this, of course, will be definitely shaded. Now it looks like I may have ran out of even the small amount of color I was using, but it is the best when you get it kind of at that point where you're able to really just kind of scratch back and forth and darken things up, because then you can really have a lot of fun with shading things. Now, because I'm shading, you actually have the ability to determine how high something is kind of perceived as, right? How far out each of these green things, like the parts of its bulb, go. If you wanted it really high, well, you can shade it in a specific way that would make it really bump out. If you didn't really care for that, you want to make it normal, you could do that too. All I'm doing really is I'm just kind of following where this is going. I'm only coloring the back part of it. Part that might not receive as much light. Just kind of scratch that in there. Maybe get a little bit more paint on it. You really got to be careful about kind of bigger globs of paint finding their way to the brush when you get more paint, because they might be stored kind of further up the brush. And if that happens, well, then kind of you can blend it out. And honestly, like one way that works pretty well is when you, like let's say you get some really dark paint over it, and it was supposed to be maybe more of a light area, just darken everything around it. It'll work just as well. It'll look fine. Spooky rocks are meant to be more that dark kind of look to it. But yeah, that's probably all I'll do for now with it. I'll probably paint some purple around it, but that's kind of what I would expect for shading, shadows, all that good stuff. Yeah, easy peasy, not too bad. The claws are definitely tedious, but if you can get past that point, I think everything else is pretty straightforward. The head and body piece, that's a little bit goofy to try to do, but once you know how, it's not too bad. Yeah, this is, we got the starters right here. Ooh. Just like that. There we go. Alright. Pretty cool. Alright, well, I will see you guys next time. I might paint spooky versions of Flareon, Jolteon, Vaporeon. I'm just thinking of different things. Usually I like to do more of the kind of the starter, the baby types. The ones that look like they're supposed to be younger, because usually they have the bigger eyes, and when you got the bigger eyes, well, you can make them even bigger like this. Have them have a bunch of shadow to them. I think you have more of an opportunity to make them look even spookier than the ones with the kind of the normal size eyes. But I haven't tried it yet, so maybe I'll be surprised. I know there's a lot of other areas for like that have the potential for shading, so that could be pretty cool. But yeah, all right, I'm going to sleep. You guys have a good night.